You feel it every time you think about talking to a woman in public. That split-second hesitation. Not because you doubt your worth, but because you can already picture the worst-case scenario. A camera, a caption, a crowd of strangers judging you. This is what dating has turned into for Gen Z men. You grew up watching other guys get humiliated online for doing something as simple as showing interest. You've seen screenshots of private messages turned into jokes. You've seen street interview clips edited to make men look awkward. You've seen TikToks where women read DMs out loud for entertainment. So when it's your turn, your body tenses. You overthink every gesture. You calculate how it might look if someone records it. It's not rejection you fear anymore, it's exposure. The possibility that one human moment might become public property. And this invisible fear has changed everything about modern attraction. Men are no longer driven by instinct. They're managed by anxiety. They don't chase what they want. They avoid what could embarrass them. And that hesitation is slowly killing something vital, masculine presence. The hidden fear behind visibility. In the past, rejection stayed private. If a woman turned you down, it stung, but it was between the two of you. Now it can live forever on someone's phone. A screenshot can travel faster than your explanation ever could. A 30-second clip can define your reputation for years. So men build walls before they build confidence. You second-guess the simplest acts of connection. If you look too long, it's creepy. If you don't look at all, it's disinterested. If you message her first, you're thirsty. If you wait, you're dry. There's no winning formula, only endless self-monitoring. That constant self-awareness numbs you. You stop feeling curious about her and start worrying about yourself. Every word becomes a risk management decision. Every silence feels like an error. You end up filtering your personality through imaginary critics who aren't even there. Yet you can hear them in your head. This is the psychological cost of visibility. When you know you're always being watched, authenticity feels unsafe. So you edit yourself down to what you think is acceptable, and women notice. They can sense when a man is performing instead of leading. They can feel when you're hesitant, even if you smile. The tragedy is that the more you protect your image, the less attractive you become. Because attraction doesn't come from perfection. It comes from certainty. A man who accepts that he might fail always feels more alive than one who's trying not to. But today's culture punishes imperfection so harshly that men would rather disappear than risk looking foolish. They forget that rejection used to build character. Now it builds hashtags. So you stay on the sidelines. You tell yourself it's safer. But deep down, you know safety isn't satisfaction. It's slow erosion. You can't feel alive while living to avoid embarrassment. The digital cage. How social media turned confidence into performance. Social media promised connection, but it delivered surveillance. Every date, every message, every slip-up can be turned into content. You don't just interact with a woman. You interact with her audience, friends, followers, strangers who might never meet you but will still form an opinion. And because you know this, you perform. You speak in safe sentences. You joke only when it's guaranteed to land. You avoid flirting because someone might call it cringe. You convince yourself that being emotionless equals being in control. But control is not confidence. Real confidence is presence. The ability to act without over-calculating the reaction. Presence can't coexist with fear of judgment. When your mind is split between her and the hypothetical viewers, you're not with her. You're trapped in your own head. That's why conversations feel hollow now. Everyone is editing themselves in real time. No one risks being misunderstood because misunderstanding has consequences. You're not building chemistry, you're building a highlight reel. And women sense the hollowness immediately. They don't want a man who's perfect on camera. They want a man who's real in person. Someone whose emotions are strong enough to exist without external validation. Someone who can make eye contact and stay there without thinking about how it might look. That kind of groundedness used to be normal. Now it feels rare, almost rebellious. The digital world has made men spectators of their own lives. You watch yourself approach, you hear yourself speak. You analyze every expression afterward. You live in replay mode instead of real time. But the woman in front of you doesn't want a replay. She wants raw presence. So here's the truth that modern culture hides. You can't be attractive while trying to be safe. You can't build respect while protecting your image. And you can't feel masculine while constantly fearing exposure. Confidence returns the moment you stop trying to manage perception and start embracing reality, messy, uncertain, human. Because what actually makes a man magnetic isn't flawlessness. It's the courage to be seen without flinching. The social mirror and the silent anxiety. There was a time when a man could make a mistake and move on. He could stumble over his words, say something awkward, or be rejected, and it would fade into memory, unrecorded and unjudged. Today, that moment can live forever. One slip, one misunderstood joke, one text taken out of context, and it becomes public property. This constant awareness of the digital gaze has rewritten male psychology from the inside out. Men now move through the world not as free actors but as self-editing projections. Every gesture passes through an invisible filter. Will this make me look weak? Will this be used against me? That's the nature of what psychologists call social self-consciousness, the chronic sense that you're being watched even when you're not. It's the internalized camera, and when this mindset fuses with masculinity, which has long been tied to status, control, and confidence, the result is paralysis. Men start believing that being cautious equals being safe, but in reality it means being invisible. Social media has made men more self-aware but less self-trusting. They're fluent in appearances but disconnected from instincts. They've replaced natural masculine spontaneity with image management. The simple act of expressing interest now feels like walking into a trap. And so men retreat into silence, not because they've lost desire, but because desire now feels dangerous. Every approach, every word could be misunderstood, misframed, or misused. It's not that Gen Z men are weak. They're hyper-aware, too aware. Awareness has turned into anxiety, and anxiety has become avoidance. They live under a psychological condition best described as anticipatory shame. It's the dread of being embarrassed before anything even happens, the emotional cost of being too conscious of judgment, and it kills authenticity before it's born. In this world, men don't fall in love. They manage impressions. They don't flirt. They calculate tone. They don't connect. They negotiate exposure. It's not emotional weakness. It's emotional exhaustion. They've been taught that one mistake could cost them reputation, credibility, or belonging. The new masculine wound. The old masculine wounds were visible. Wars, labor, rejection, survival. The new one is silent, the fear of expression. Men today are growing up in a paradox. They're told to be emotionally intelligent, open, and communicative, but punished when their emotions are inconvenient, imperfect, or misread. They're told vulnerability is strength, but only if it looks confident enough. They're told to pursue, but never too directly. They're told to lead, but only if everyone approves of how they lead. And so the masculine identity fractures. What we're seeing now is a generation of men who've lost permission to act. They're emotionally literate but behaviorally frozen. They know what a healthy man is supposed to be, but they can't feel it anymore. This is what psychologists refer to as self-censorship trauma. It's the learned habit of silencing your instincts to avoid potential disapproval. Over time, it corrodes self-confidence at its root. Because masculine energy is not about domination, it's about initiative. It's about that natural push toward life, toward expression, toward the unknown. When you strip a man of that, when he must second-guess every move, he begins to live in mental exile. He no longer trusts his desires. He no longer trusts his words. He no longer trusts himself. And when a man loses self-trust, his relationships collapse before they even start. He's no longer present. He's rehearsing. He's no longer honest. He's managing optics. He's no longer free. He's defensive. Women sense this instantly. A man who's too careful feels emotionally sterile. He might be kind, articulate, and well-intentioned, but there's no edge, no polarity, no tension. He feels like a ghost of himself, safe but forgettable. And so a cycle begins. Men suppress themselves to avoid ridicule. Women lose attraction because of that suppression. And men take the rejection as proof they were right to hold back. The masculine wound deepens quietly under layers of politeness and fear, until one day he realizes that he's not protecting his dignity, he's burying it. Digital exposure and the death of intimacy. In this new world, connection is public property. A date isn't just a private encounter, it's a potential story post. A text isn't a conversation, it's a screenshot waiting to happen. And love itself has become a brand, a shared illusion curated for likes. But what dies in that process is intimacy, the sacred space where two people can meet without performance. Psychologists have begun describing this as emotional surveillance culture. It's when people internalize the expectation of being watched so deeply that even their private lives become performative. This destroys not just trust between partners, but trust within oneself. Because how can you explore desire if you're constantly afraid of how it looks? For Gen Z men, the fear of exposure isn't just social, it's existential. They've grown up being told that everything is content. Their private thoughts, humor, insecurities, all can be turned into digital artifacts. So they've learned to live behind controlled masks. This is why dating feels shallow. This is why emotional connection feels rare. Everyone's performing safety, but no one's feeling depth. The tragedy is that many men want to love, but love requires surrender, and surrender is impossible under observation. So they choose emotional control instead. They avoid confessing feelings, they delay vulnerability, they keep things casual, because indifference can't be ridiculed. But that emotional control isn't power, it's a cage. It's the death of masculine presence, the quiet extinction of warmth and risk and authenticity. And the longer this continues, the more disconnected the sexes become. Women crave vulnerability but mock weakness. Men crave connection but fear exposure. Both sides mirror each other's insecurities and call it incompatibility. The new intimacy crisis isn't about love dying. It's about fear replacing honesty. And until men reclaim the courage to be seen as they are, flawed, expressive, real, connection will remain something people talk about online, not something they truly live. The fear of being seen. There's a strange irony in our time. Men are more visible than ever, yet they've never felt more unseen. Their faces appear on screens. Their voices echo in comment sections. Their presence exists in digital fragments, yet their inner worlds remain hidden, dismissed or distorted. This is the new psychological paradox. Visibility without recognition. For many Gen Z men, this has created a quiet form of identity fatigue. They feel watched but misunderstood, exposed but unheard. Every attempt to express themselves feels like shouting through glass. This exhaustion breeds emotional detachment. Because when being authentic is met with criticism, when being emotional is mocked as weakness, when being masculine is labeled as toxic, the safest option becomes silence. And silence over time becomes identity. Men start designing personalities that minimize risk, neutral tones, safe humor, controlled expressions. They hide their passions behind irony, their pain behind sarcasm. They become experts at camouflage. But what they don't realize is that every mask eventually suffocates its wearer. The more you try to control how others see you, the more you lose touch with who you are. Psychologists refer to this as self-alienation. The emotional distance between your true self and the self you perform. It's not depression, not anxiety, but something subtler. A quiet emptiness that makes everything feel meaningless. This is why so many modern men feel disconnected, even when surrounded by people. They've mastered the art of social safety, but not the art of emotional courage. Being seen used to mean being recognized for who you are. Now it means being judged for how well you perform the role expected of you. And so men shrink, not in strength, but in spirit. They stop standing out. They stop trying to lead. They stop trying to love deeply, because deep emotions in this world are liabilities. But the truth is, the fear of being seen isn't about others at all. It's about the internalized belief that your raw self isn't enough. That if people saw who you really are, uncertain, sensitive, imperfect, they would reject you. Healing begins the moment a man realizes that authenticity might cost him approval, but it gives him back his soul. Reclaiming the courage to connect. There's a forgotten art to connection, one that no algorithm, no app, no viral trend can replace. It's the courage to show up as yourself, even when it's uncomfortable. Real connection begins where performance ends. And for men today, that means relearning how to be human. Not impressive, not perfect, not untouchable, but real. The first step is psychological deconditioning, detaching from the social scripts that tell you how to behave. Stop trying to prove that you're the good guy, the alpha, or the enlightened male. Stop trying to curate an identity that looks desirable to women or acceptable to the world. Start living in alignment with what's true to you. Because attraction isn't built from performance, it's built from presence. When a man is grounded in himself, his calmness speaks louder than perfection ever could. Therapists often talk about reclaiming the inner masculine, not as dominance, but as direction. A man's inner direction gives him strength against cultural noise. It reminds him that being misunderstood is survivable, but self-betrayal is not. To reconnect with others, men must first reconnect with their own emotional rhythm. The instinct that once made them bold, playful, expressive. This doesn't mean being careless or unaware. It means acting without constant self-surveillance. A confident man today isn't the one who dominates. It's the one who doesn't flinch under exposure. He can be recorded, mocked, judged, but he remains consistent. Because he's not performing for validation, he's expressing from truth. The irony is that women don't crave perfect men. They crave real ones. They crave a man who can hold emotional tension without collapsing into fear. A man who can feel embarrassed but not lose composure. A man who doesn't need to escape every moment of vulnerability. The masculine healing of this generation begins with a simple act. The return of emotional honesty. Not every feeling needs to be optimized for social approval. Not every mistake defines your character. Sometimes showing up is enough. Beyond the fear of going viral. When you strip everything away, the apps, the labels, the algorithms, what remains is this. Human connection will always demand risk. To love is to be vulnerable. To express is to be misunderstood. To be masculine is to stand in that discomfort and still choose authenticity. The modern man's challenge isn't lack of options. It's the lack of emotional safety to be himself. He's surrounded by advice telling him how to text, how to posture, how to win. But deep down, he knows that none of it matters if he can't be at peace with his own reflection. The truth is, you don't need to go viral to be seen. You don't need validation to have worth. You don't need to play a role to deserve love. The antidote to viral fear is inner stability. When a man knows who he is, public judgment loses its power. There's freedom in realizing that your life doesn't need to be content. It needs to be experienced. The people who matter won't turn your mistakes into memes. They'll turn your honesty into trust. So let them talk, let them judge, let them scroll. Because the man who's not afraid to be himself, even when the world is watching, is the only one who's truly untouchable.